Landon Lee. Very nostalgic alcohol bomb, including the parking situation. So anyway, great to see you all. I was curious before we get started, like what type waiting like off the portfolio. Sweet. Okay. Why? Okay. Anybody in the program? Else there? Awesome. Juniors, all seniors. Okay, cool. Juniors, nice. And the other one, sophomores. Okay, cool. And any freshmen? Nice. Cool. Very cool. Awesome. So what kinds of things, you can just kind of raise your hand or shout them out. What kinds of things are you guys learning in the program right now? Salt principles. Yeah, weeds. Yeah, that's a big one for sure. It's all. What else?
No, you can go ahead. Go ahead.
Literary devices. Yes. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. We'll be touching on those a little bit. That's great.
For us seniors, we're diving into some UI UX design. Right now we're doing some user interface stuff and doing research.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So we'll be talking a little bit about research too. Well, that all sounds awesome. So yeah, I guess we can go ahead and jump into the presentation. Is this okay for everybody from over here, from over there? Don't want you guys bouncing around. Okay. So yeah, let's go ahead to the next slide. So today I'm going to be talking about the importance of storytelling. There's perfect. So I'll kind of dive into my background a little bit throughout this, but storytelling I think is key to graphic design and what we do, which is motion. But it's really crucial for a lot of things. The disclaimer that I put up here is throughout this presentation, I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to be using the terms like animation and motion design kind of interchangeably. There is a difference. I think animation is a little bit more narrative, whereas motion design tends to be a little bit more of like actual design in motion, go figure. And so for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to be kind of using them interchangeably. So I don't want that to trip anybody up. Yeah, that's my discovery. All right, so gentleman at the computer, what's your name? Tyler. Nice to meet you, Tyler. I set this presentation up really weird, so you might have to click in very specific areas. For now, I kind of wanted to throw out there, have you guys ever seen a brand or a logo that you thought looks like really cool, but you had no idea what the brand was for? Do you guys can you think of any off the top of your head? It's all good. Yeah. Well, luckily I brought some examples. So, Tyler, if you can click in the left middle part of the screen. Left.
Wait, try hitting the arrow. I think it'll automatically pop up. Oh.
Yeah, sorry. It's like click activated. Like right there. There we go. Sweet. Okay, so so can anybody tell me like what they think this brand might be for? Just throw out any ideas. There's no
DNA.
What was that? DNA. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. What was Any other guesses? Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Those are all great guesses. The closest was like top-down view of a map. And I think that was a very good guess, but I don't think that's very clear in this example. And by the way, this is not to, dig on the person who designed this. It's just an example of, how effectively they're communicating with the logo. And in this case, in my opinion, that's not very clear. And, I'm sure a lot of you have been learning, it's very important that a logo's story or a logo's significance or what it stands for is evident right off the bat. Like, people should be able to look right at it and figure out pretty quickly what it's about. So this one I would say not so much. Can we click on the middle right side of the screen? Yes. Oh,
Hey.
nice. Okay, what about this one? Let's kind of use the vernacular of this presentation. So what story do you guys think this is telling in a few words?
Natural.
Plants, natural, what else? Organic, okay. Renewable energy, okay. What kind of things do you guys see in this logo? Do you see any images or symbols? Okay, like a J. Mhm. Okay. Okay. Okay, cool. Arrow, leaf, sprout, those are all great guesses. My understanding is the intention behind this logo was to be a leaf and a house. So I'm not seeing the house, and I'm barely seeing the leaf. So again, this is all going to tie into this presentation, but the story that it's telling isn't super clear, especially at quick glance. I'm going to switch gears a little bit since we're talking about animation. Has anybody seen a movie that you thought was cool, had some cool graphics, but it couldn't quite keep your interest in the movie? Any examples?
You ever seen Jupiter's Ascending?
I haven't seen it, but I've heard
That movie
not
is
great things about it.
It's great visual effects, but that movie is the worst.
Okay, that's a perfect example. Anybody else? Yeah.
Look like that.
Completely agree. Yeah, those are all great examples. And Tyler, if you can click the very middle of the screen. Sweet, killing it. This one is my choice, which is like the second and third matrices. The first one blew my mind. I loved it. The story was great. The second and third, I couldn't tell you what they were about. I mean, in general, I know, but I couldn't tell you specific plot points. So again, this is a movie, but it's the same principles apply. Like, you should be able to tell a clear story and connect it back to your visuals. So, they did a great job on the visuals part, not so much on the story. Okay, so the next slide, please. Perfect. So graphic design, as a lot of us know, is visual communication. I think Richard or Mario or all of them, taught us that it's visual communication at its at its core. But in addition to that, it's also storytelling in its simplest form. And whether that be in UI, UX, or logo design, or brochure design, or whatever it is, you're telling a story in graphic design. That's our job, is to visually tell a story. So as I talk about storytelling, it doesn't necessarily have to be a beginning, middle, and end, like a book or anything like that. But we just want to convey something. We want to, storytelling can be, you can have like micro stories, right? Like when we have conversations, we kind of tell each other micro stories. They're not, long, I was born this year and, I grew up in the mountains of whatever in Minnesota. I don't know if Minnesota has mountains. But you know, it can be simple things like, you know, whatever you ate for lunch or whatever. So storytelling can be smaller than just, you know, a big story. So as we go through this presentation, when I talk about storytelling, it can be as simple as, you know, just a quick thought that you gather from something. Okay, next slide, please. So the other things we're going to talk about today are, go ahead and click for me, Tyler. Thank you. My personal history of telling stories, why storytelling is important in design, what makes great storytelling, and the benefits of storytelling in the quote real world, you know, with clients and all that stuff. Okay, next slide, please. So that's me as a kid. I first wanted to kind of give you guys some background with my history of telling stories. And as you might be able to tell, I had a really active imagination as a kid, as indicated by me fighting invisible ninjas or whatever I'm doing here. And so, yeah, in the spirit of storytelling, I figured I'd kind of give you guys some background. So next slide, please. So that's my brother and I. We used to feed our imaginations in three major ways. Can you go ahead and click, Tyler? TV, toys, and drawing. And so these three things were kind of my like magic trifecta. Like these three things inspired my creativity and sparked my imagination in a lot of ways. You know, watching TV was inspirational. You know, seeing different characters and different stories and action and comedy and, you know, mystery and things like that. And then playing with toys allowed me to start kind of creating my own story, you know, like, especially having a brother, you know, we would kind of, you know, make our toys fight and stuff. And it really gave us an opportunity to like explore our own imaginations. And then for me, drawing and writing too, kind of both went hand in hand in being able to tell my own stories. And that was like really the start and the most exciting part for me, was being able to like draw something different that people may not have seen before and share it with them and explain, you know, what's going on in my little noggin. And so, you know, I think those things obviously carry forward throughout my life. And, you know, which is why I'm a designer now, because, you know, sketching and being able to design and get those ideas out is, you know, part of our job. Next slide, please. So this also carried over to right when I started college, I had a job at a news station here in town. And this is me slightly nervous and terrified to hold that giant camera for the first time. But when I worked there, I was producing animated digital ads and like promos and commercials for clients and for the station itself. And that was a very fast-paced environment, and it required you to come up with ideas quickly to be able to tell client stories quickly. A lot of times we just get a request like, this client wants to promote this sale or promote this product or whatever. You know, can we have something by Friday? And so we often didn't have a lot of time to prepare, and we would just kind of, you know, figure something out quickly. So that was really an opportunity for me to exercise that muscle and try to figure out, you know, how to tell a story quickly and effectively. And next one, please. And then ultimately, you know, I was in this classroom learning how to tell stories through graphic design. Those are real sketches and thumbnails against one of these whiteboards when I was in class. You know, it taught me to tell stories in a different way than I was kind of used to. And again, it taught me to tell stories in kind of a micro way, like quickly convey something through visuals. Yeah. Okay, next slide, please. So let's talk about the importance of storytelling in graphic design. Next, please. So, storytelling, as I've been saying, is an essential part of graphic design, especially in branding and motion design. But again, it can apply to UI, UX, and pretty much every other facet of visual communication. Stories are important because they create a sense of human connection through empathy. So let's take a break for a second. Actually, can you go to the next slide, Tyler? So what are some of your guys' favorite brands? You can just kind of throw them out there. What products do you use every day that you're like, man, I gotta have this in my life? What was it? Discord? Okay. Cool. Yes. That's kind of crucial. Sweet. Okay. Apple. Thank you. I was gonna say, who's gonna say Apple? Anybody else?
I think it's funny that Procreate decided to name their app that.
Yeah. It's a very interesting brand for sure, brand name. The reason I asked this question, let's go through some of those examples. Let's start with Apple because that's kind of the easiest. So can you go ahead and click, Tyler? What are some adjectives you use to describe Apple? Like just stream of consciousness, whatever comes to the top of mind.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Minimal.
Yeah.
I think it's like evil.
Hey, that's a valid adjective for sure. What about like Logitech? What are some adjectives you can think of that come to mind when you think of that brand? Functional.
Technology.
Mm-hmm.
performance.
Yeah. Sweet. And then what were some of the other examples? Sorry, I forgot.
Discord.
Discord. Yes, thank you. What about Discord?
Fun.
Okay.
Community.
Cursed, innovative,
What was that one?
cursed.
Oh, okay. Cool. So the reason I asked that question is because those are the stories that you guys get from those brands, right? Like the adjectives you use to describe those brands are part of the story. It's part of the brand story, but it's also part of like your story using that brand and interacting with that brand. So, you might think of functional when you use your Logitech, and maybe that's why you choose to trust their products. Or, Discord is fun and possibly hurts. And so, maybe that's what you think of when you use Discord. But those are all stories, like even if they're little stories, they're stories that are being told by that brand. And those are communicated in so many ways. Like, again, graphic design is visual communication. So that includes the UI and UX of Discord. Like as you're using Discord, the features, the buttons, the colors, everything, the typography, all of it comes together to tell a story. And what story it tells kind of depends, but again, I think you all kind of had similar answers, so that means that they're telling a consistent story to all of you in a way. So yeah, I think that's much all I want to say there. So okay, can we go to the next slide? So the other thing is all of those adjectives were because those brands likely make you feel something, Apple is such a great example of this, of course. I'm sure a lot of us have Apple products, including MacBooks and iPhones. And I think we all typically trust Apple because it makes us feel a certain way. And even if it's not, like I'm using my iPhone and I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel so good using my iPhone right now. It's still like subconsciously something that you feel. Like maybe it's intuitive, or sleek, And so we feel comfortable using it. I wanted to ask, this is an example of it's kind of like a mini brand for a company called Unfold. But what kinds of adjectives would you guys use to describe this?
Fun.
Fun, vibrant, colorful.
Like saltwater.
Yeah.
Welcoming.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with all those things. It feels very inviting to me too. Like I would feel comfortable in whatever this is, you know, I don't even really know much about it, but just at first glance, it's like, I think all of us reacted to it in some way, which means that they're communicating some kind of story. And even if we don't know the full story or the backstory to this company or this, tea time product, like we all felt something instantly, even if that was kind of what I mentioned earlier, like a micro story. So, that all comes through in the typography, the illustration, the color palette, and the way that things are arranged. Like all of those things contribute to this brand story. And we all felt something instantly. Like we looked at this and we felt it, and that's the power of storytelling through branding and through design. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, sorry. Sorry to do this to you guys, bring up this emotional damage, but animation and motion design is the same way. I'm sure a lot of us remember this traumatizing scene from Up, but if you don't, maybe you don't, subject yourself to it.
You should.
True. So, the reason I share this example is because obviously this animation made us feel something. And the reason we all remember it is because it had an impact, because Pixar mastered the use of empathy in this animation with this character in particular. And we all, remember what happened to Carl. It can be a powerful tool. Empathy specifically can be a powerful tool in, all facets of design, or animation or motion. So, something to keep in mind. So before we go to the next slide, I just kind of want to set it up a little bit. This is an animation that I want to share with you guys that my company did for a client. And, we went through the whole planning process, which we'll kind of talk about in a little bit, to make sure that we effectively told this story to the best of our ability. And I'm curious to hear, what kinds of things you guys get from it or feel from it. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And hopefully this plays. I'm sorry to laugh. I'm laughing at your reaction. But that's good. It's a reaction. I got a reaction from you guys. I'm gonna make a name for myself for all the wrong reasons. No, so this was part of a process where, in my defense, we worked with another company who developed the concept and the storyboard. But it was our job to tell that story in a visual way. And so I don't even think I have to ask you guys what you felt from that. But that was the goal, to get a reaction out of people. And that was done through storytelling, and we used different elements like empathy, we tried to relate to people with the use of like Instagram, texting and driving, or, using social media and driving. And then of course the puppies, rest in peace, is how we you know, get you to kind of feel something too. So there's a whole process that goes into it, but you know, it's a kind of the arc of the story that we were trying to tell. So let's see. All right, so let's go ahead and go to the next slide as well. So this is a different example. It's a lot more heartwarming, don't worry. But the story behind this video is also its own kind of story. So there's like, you know, the actual story that you're gonna see, but there's the making of and kind of the reason behind this video that's its own story. So let's go ahead and play this one.
Showtime!
Ooh, looking good, trees. Ooh, look at that bark work, Nathan.
I use real fungus.
Ew. Gross. How's it going, Luis?
I'm not going out there. So many people looking at me. I'm gonna be sick.
Just pretend that everyone in the audience is in their underwear and you'll be fine.
My parents are in the audience.
Yeah, everyone except them.
Logan, I swear if you drop me, I am so breaking up with you!
How's it coming, Terrence?
He still hasn't figured out how to get me in the play.
Don't worry, Gracie. The curtain only goes up when everyone has a part to play. I believe in you, Terrence.
You should have been tree number 5.
Whoa, okay, I gotcha. Uh-oh, whoa, watch out for those audio cables. Don't want to lose your better half.
Better for who?
The left! The other left! A play without Gracie is like a unicorn without a horn.
A fairy godmother without a wand.
A witch without a broom?
Ooh, like toadstools without toads or stools. Not helping!
No pressure.
1 minute!
Okay, Terrence, tell me you've got something.
I'm sorry.
I'm not gonna be in the play. Am I? Am I?
I am not going out there without Gracie.
Neither am I. Nice try, Luis. Dang.
The curtain doesn't rise unless we all have a part.
For sure.
That'll help.
I need that audio cable. Quick, everyone give him a hand.
Come on, get him over here.
Let's go.
Let's go. Ah! All you, Terrence. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Let's go.
Faster.
It's perfect. Once upon a time, in a dark, dark forest, the air was full of magic. So powerful, even the trees could cast a spell or two.
Curtain only goes up when everyone has a part to play.
You should have been tree number 5.
It's perfect.
So many people looking at me. I'm gonna be sick.
I'm so breaking up with you!
2 minutes till showtime. A little help?
Better for who? I use real fungus.
Ew.
Gross.
Toadstools without toads or stools.
I got nothing.
A play without Gracie is like
A fairy godmother without a wand.
A witch without a broom?
a dragon without fire.
A big red wolf without teeth.
Sorry.
Well, you can pause it there and just stop.
Time.
So, so you guys, the story itself was obviously really well done, and it told a compelling story about these kids, but then there's also kind of that secondary story that was about how these kids' play was able to come to life, even though they were stuck at home during COVID. So this is, I think, kind of a rare example where it works on 2 different levels, of storytelling. But the point here with this particular animation is, good storytelling can create lasting impressions. And I came across this video, I think last year, and clearly I still remember it because I thought it was a really heartwarming story about being able to bring this play to life, even though, you know, these kids couldn't perform it for their parents in person. You know, a lot of those brands that you guys mentioned earlier came to mind for you because something about the brand was memorable too. So, you know, again, empathy and creating like lasting impressions is a great way to, you know, stick in people's minds. Okay, next slide, Tyler, please. Is it just progressing video? So yeah, what I just said. But this is an example too of, does anybody actually remember these computers?
Yeah.
I remember.
Okay.
In my elementary school, in order for someone to get pieces, they had to have their ticket pulled out of a thing, and there was like 6 of us that get pulled.
Oh, wow. So they would like draw a name or something?
Yep.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so, you know, I think the reason I shared this is because I think for a lot of us that do remember these computers and you know, other Apple devices, this is an Apple device, by the way, this is an old iMac, I think. You know, we have that association with using a cool computer that was capable of, you know, doing graphic things. And, you know, that's carried through to today. Like we trust this brand, we remember it, and we remember, you know, the positive associations that we have with it too. All right, next slide, please. So what makes great storytelling? Next one, please. So there's a lot of crossover between motion and graphic design when it comes to what makes a great story. The first piece is research, which, as I hear from Fong, is not familiar to you guys at all right now. Nothing you're familiar with, but that's sarcasm, by the way. Research is super crucial to any design project or any piece of storytelling. And the biggest reason for that is because you have to know the background of what you're talking about to be able to tell an effective story. And in branding and motion, both of those, it means understanding the audience and the history of whatever you're branding or whatever you're, you know, creating a project for. So once you start to learn that information, that information, can you go ahead and click, Tyler? That information will inform design choices like tone, style, typography, and color palette. So, you know, proper research, which again, I'm sure you're all familiar with it right now, overly familiar with it, but it really helps you to make those decisions because each of those pieces, you know, should relate back to your audience or who you're talking to, and will help you to tell your story effectively. Next slide, please. The second piece is organized findings. So what I mean by that is, you know, how do you take that information and analyze it and turn it into something useful? And most importantly, if you can click, Tyler, what is the key idea you want to communicate? This is, you know, maybe obvious to everyone, but like this is the thing that you want to distill down. You want to find, as you're researching, you know, this is what you want to kind of keep coming back to. It's like your North Star when you're designing. What is the key idea that you want to communicate? And, you know, for the sake of what we're talking about today, it's like, what's the story that you want to tell? And this will help you as you go through each phase of your project, you know, from concepting, what is the idea that I want to communicate? What's the story I want to tell? To refinement, to, you know, getting feedback from your peers. You know, if their feedback isn't, you know, as constructive as you're hoping, try to tie it back to like, what is it that I'm trying to communicate, and does this make sense? Does that apply to what I'm trying to communicate? Next slide, please. And then planning, of course, is a little important. When it comes to branding and design, you know, as again, I'm sure you're all familiar with, iterative concepting and doing it over and over and over again and refining it and making it better is all part of the planning process. And, you know, you do want to consider like how this project is going to unfold over time. And so planning is super important too, especially when it comes to motion as well. You know, every good motion project should start with storyboarding, you know, chunking out like what is happening at key moments so you can get that flow down and you can understand like what you're trying to communicate clearly. So planning is very important in that process as well. And next slide, please. And then the use of storytelling techniques. So I think it was Fawn that was mentioning earlier, or it was someone else that mentioned like the literary devices that you're learning, like metaphors and, you know, visual metaphor, things like that. Those are all super key techniques that you can use to tell a compelling story, because again, there's a lot of things that are connected to those literary devices, like personal experience and, you know, relatability and, you know, those types of things. And then there's like, you know, things like surprise, like the unexpected that happens in a video, like when the puppies were, you know, went to heaven earlier. I don't think anybody saw that coming. So that was a surprise, you know, and I got a reaction and for better or worse, was hopefully memorable. And then again, you know, empathy and relatability. So utilizing those kind of storytelling techniques too, to pull in your viewers and have them understand your story and what you're trying to communicate a little bit better. All right, next slide, please. So how does storytelling make an impact? We can go to the next one. So with, you know, client work specifically, and I mean, especially as you guys are, you know, sharing projects with your instructors and everything too, storytelling adds depth to your work, and it, you know, creates meaning, and it helps ensure that if you're doing this for a client, that their brand or their product stands out among their competition, but it also helps you to stand out among your peers as well, whether professionally or in the classroom. And when it comes to client work too, it also helps to make sure that, you know, when you make them look better, they will keep coming back to you for, you know, more work because you've done your research and you've, you know, added depth to your storytelling. So, yeah, storytelling really adds depth to your work. Great, next slide, please. And then telling a compelling story also keeps you and your team motivated. So when you're working on a group project or when you're working with coworkers, you know, in the design world, it helps you all to have, again, kind of like a North Star that you can all keep coming back to, and a focus that you can keep, you know, working towards. And as you define that story, you know, it keeps you driven to, yeah, stay focused on that story. All right, so let's recap. Next slide, please. So storytelling is essential in graphic design and motion alike, and it helps viewers, again, to connect with your work. It creates a lasting impression and inspires them to follow your product more closely. And of course, you know, it creates a sense of human connection through empathy. Once again, next slide, please. I'm sorry again, but you know, another great example, or going back to this example of, you know, empathy and getting people to feel stuff. Next slide. As you, you know, go from project to project, consider storytelling in everything, everything that you do, from branding to web design to motion. Constantly ask yourself, what story is it that I'm trying to tell? And don't be afraid to ask your peers if that story comes across clearly as you're working through things. All right, and that's that. Any questions? Yeah,
Slightly off topic, but with the video of like the children play,
yeah,
and even with like the like the soundtrack and the music that was behind the play the animation, so it will also convey emotion. So I was curious if like indoor like production process, do you source out like music, do you find it yourself, like how does that sort of work within the workflow?
Yeah. That's an awesome observation, and I completely agree. It's like just another element that creates empathy and, you know, the use of sound can really enhance the story. So great observation. And then to answer your question, yeah, I work with one of my buddies actually who does sound design, and he did the sound design for that traumatizing puppy animation. And, you know, through things like, you know, cutting out the music and all the sound, and then the character gasps before they hit the car, you know, it adds emphasis to that moment. So there's a lot of, yeah, there's definitely a lot of intentionality behind sound design. And yeah, it's all things to consider, you know, like the proper music, does it fit the tone? And the proper sound effects. You also don't want something like that to come across too goofy, because then people just don't take it seriously, or they, you know, roll their eyes and think it's, you know, silly. So, yeah, did I answer your question? Okay, cool. Yeah. Any other cues? Yeah.
So about like logos not really telling me much about the brand, like, isn't Facebook logo just the word Facebook? What do you think of that?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, there's still things like color and typography that add to the story. So, you know, their use of typography, whether it's the right choice or not, you know, like, or in color can help you to feel things. Like I often say, and again, I'm sure you guys learn this as well, but like color is kind of the emotion of a brand, you know, like it's the part that brings out, I think we connect with color more than anything else visually, you know. And so I think those choices can convey certain emotions as well. Again, I think, you know, Facebook has enough of a history that like we all have our own stories with Facebook and our own connections to Facebook, but yeah, I think that's one way that they can communicate or tell their story. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yes.
So when you're doing work for like clients, do they often have like an idea, like a sense of what they want, like already like kind of like storyboarded out, or is that mostly what they give you like a message that they want to convey, and they give you like creative liberty to do what you want to convey that message?
Yeah, another great question. I think it depends. Like sometimes we'll get different pieces, you know, or different parts of the process. So like sometimes we'll get a script like completed, and then we'll take that script and turn it into a storyboard and communicate to them how we would visualize the story happening from start to finish. Sometimes they send us the storyboard, like in that you know, distracted driving video. We were provided the storyboard and like some of the characters, and we kind of built out some of the other scenes. And so they provided that part of it. And sometimes we don't have anything, you know, they need help with script writing and concepting the whole idea and pacing it all out. So we'll usually work with a script writer, because, you know, that's not our strength per se. And then develop the storyboard from that, and then kind of build from there. Yeah. Yes.
Not as often designer or illustrator, like motion illustrator.
Mhm.
What are the best programs to start with for both
Illustration and animation or motion graphics?
and
Yeah. So illustration, I think, is kind of personal preference. Like Photoshop and Illustrator would be my recommendations. Obviously, things like Procreate on iPad, you know, if you want to draw something from hand, you know, by hand or put a little more, I don't know, personality into it. But I mean, they're all such versatile tools that you can really make any of them work. And for the most part, if you organize it properly, they're all compatible with After Effects, which is what we use for motion. So yeah, I would say those three are really good. There's also a way to bring in Illustrator graphics so that they remain vector-based in After Effects, so you can scale it up infinitely and, you know, obviously never loses resolution. So that's a nice workflow too. But yeah, I would say those three, and if you're not familiar with any or some of them, you know, I'd say just jump right in. And what I did and what I recommend to people is to kind of find examples of things that you want to try, or if you have an idea, like look up, you know, parts of how to do it on YouTube. There's, you know, so many tutorials and stuff out there. And then just start, you know, giving it a shot. I think that's the best way to familiarize yourself with like the tools. It's just to kind of dive in at first, you know. Yeah. So I mean, everything. Well, the one thing that I shared with you guys that we did was all Adobe, you know, Illustrator and After Effects. Yes.
How long did it take you to learn After Effects?
Great question. Man, years, like I think I'm still kind of getting comfortable with it, you know. But like I would say at least, and I don't want this to, you know, intimidate anybody, but like, you know, maybe a decade at least to just get really familiar with it. Like, you know, there's things that starting out, you know, you kind of like learn, but I think all the nuances and like really small things that you can do that make a big impact, like come with time and experience. So, but again, you know, no better way to learn than to just dive in and yeah.
As a designer, how do you decide when the cost and time of implementing motion and design like adds enough to a design to be worth it instead of just keeping it as
Static?
Yeah.
That's a great question. So I think it kind of depends on its use, you know, and it also, I think, depends on like if it's a client project or if it's a personal project. Like, you know, I think it's subjective if it's personal. If you want to spend the time and resources to make it something, you know, put it in motion. And then there's like, you know, the fun factor too. Like, you know, for us, it's like fun to do this stuff, so we enjoy doing it. But yeah, I think that's kind of a tricky one. I think it kind of depends on like if it's, you know, like, I think clients have to kind of make that call a lot of time when it comes to client work, if they see it as something that's valuable. But yeah, I think it just kind of boils down to like time and resources, like for personal and client, you know. If you feel like you have the time and resources to do it, then by all means, I say, you know, check it out, try to do it. And same for clients, you know, if they have the budget and resources to put something into motion, then, you know, I think it can be valuable. But, you know, there's studies that show that, you know, motion is anything moving, you know, like whether it's a video of someone or something, or if it's just an animation, like studies show that people, you know, respond well to that and react well to that, and it tends to be more memorable than something that's static. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I was gonna ask, when you first started in like your production graphics, what was some of the work that you do at like a starter level? Like, were you more like focused on storyboard and like some illustrations, or did they give you more like hands work with motion and everything? You know?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it kind of started with like, so my professional life, it started at the news station, and I was doing animated digital ads first. So I was using Flash, which I think is Animate now, Adobe Animate, at the time. And, you know, it would be really, I wish I could say it was like a really detailed process, but it was really like, they just throw it at you and they're like, you know, give us a couple ads by, you know, in a couple of days. So a lot of it had to happen kind of internally, like just coming up with the idea quickly. You know, sometimes we'd source graphics and text and everything. Of course, we'd have to know like what we're communicating, but just pulling that all together and kind of coming up with it on the fly. So it was kind of the whole process just truncated and, you know, done really quickly. And the same with like shooting or animating promos and stuff too, like, you know, video promos, like we'd be given like, I guess the problem, like what they want to communicate, and then you'd have to kind of figure out, you know, what the script says and all the graphics and how we're gonna put it all together. So, yeah, like I said, I wish it was more detailed and like, I could tell you I started in one department or something, but it's kind of like we had to do it all at the same time, you know, which has its, you know, pros and cons, but yeah. Yes.
And then a question in the chat, do you have any tips for seeking inspiration when you're struggling with communicating a compelling story for a project?
Yeah, that's another tricky one. It's something we come across a lot too, like, I think part of it boils down to like research again. So like, you know, making sure that you're digging into as many facets of things as you can, like, you know, just diving as deep into the story as you can, because the deeper you dive, the more things will start to pop up. And I'm sure, you know, excuse me, Mario has, or, you know, whomever your instructors are, have shared techniques for drilling down and coming up with ideas. I think one of the ones that worked really well for me was like mind maps. So, you know, sounds like a lot of you are familiar with those, but like, you know, drawing, if I may, you know, like an idea here or a word, and then you kind of branch off and do another word, and then those kind of spark new ideas here, and then you just kind of, you know, keep going from there. And then, you know, I usually go back through too, and again, I'm not sure, you know, how much of this you guys already know, but like I would go through and kind of come back to these mind maps and, oh, it looks like somebody else is drawing mind maps. And then like circle ideas or, you know, highlight them with different colors. But techniques like that, excuse me, can really help you to like mine your ideas and mine your research. And then like words start to pop up, and then you can start to look up those words. Like one resource I like to use is like Dribble, just to kind of see what other designers are doing. But more so, I find that like looking through there, or like icon libraries, if you type in a word, it's kind of like a quick way to see how to communicate something. So, you know, if I was to type in like idea in like an icon library, you know, maybe a light bulb pops up or something, and maybe that's not something I want to use because that's pretty, you know, pretty common symbolism. But like, you know, there's different things that you can kind of gather from those. But I think honestly, like just kind of like mining your ideas or mining, you know, through mind maps or whatever, I think can really get to that point. Hopefully that answered that person's question. Anybody else? Paul, question back there. Did you still have a question? Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay, I kind of have like a half idea form, so I'll try my best to like articulate it. How do you capture like emotion with like the most basic bare bones things? Are you able to convey sadness through how you move like a circle? And are you able to convey those things through simple like movement and like very abstractly? Is that like part of the process?
Absolutely. It's a great question. I think like one of the things like we pride ourselves on, we like to do, is make sure that like if we're animating characters, subtle movements like, you know, how quickly they look, or, you know, what their eyes do or what their mouth does, all of those things can tell, you know, a different story. And especially as like humans, we learn to pick up on those emotions really easily and quickly. And so it's important that you include details like that because they can make a huge difference. And, you know, abstractly, I think it's very similar to like design in general too, like all the things that, you know, you're all learning about how to convey emotion and communicate ideas through design, like all those abstract things, like the shape of things and the color of things again, you know, all those little things can add up to tell different parts of the story.
Give a big round of applause for them.
Yeah, thank you guys for having this great chatting you all. Yeah.
One last question.
Yes.
Like the best place to follow you, or what are you doing?
Oh yeah, just the part where I plug. Yeah, you can follow us on Noble Creative Co on Instagram. We have a YouTube channel with like one video on it. So but yeah, LinkedIn, you know, it's kind of boring, but I don't know. That's pretty much it. Not a lot of social. Thank you. Yeah, of course. We have a random tip for you guys that I learned today, and I'm super excited about it, which is why I want to share it with my design peers. Which is, I don't know if you guys have ever looked for like Apple device mockups before, but a lot of them are like paid and can be kind of pricey, and you know, you're college students, so it's not ideal. I just discovered today that Apple has a website with a ton of mock-ups of their own devices that you can download for free. And it kind of blew my mind, which is why I'm sharing it with everyone. I'll try to get that link to Fong, and then you can maybe share it out, but
Oh, for sure, yeah.
super helpful. I wish I had discovered it earlier.
Yeah, we're gonna bump that everywhere.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Put on the word out there.
Oh, put it up there. Oh, yeah. Well, thank you everybody for visiting. Everybody, thank you so much. Tomorrow we're gonna actually have Lauren Hiroshi Akshari come in, who's the art director of Honey, which is a woman community design studio and stuff. So we're gonna be talking a lot about representation of design and important both that and in her career as well. Yeah, look forward to that.
Yeah, she's awesome too.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you guys.
Before anyone leaves, if you haven't signed up, make sure you do, just so we know you can, please.
Bye, guys.